Welcome to Bible Reader Companion. We are continuing our studies in Titus chapters 1 through 3, the entire book of Titus. And today we're going to take our study from chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. Beginning in verse 1, Titus chapter 2. But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, in patience. That the older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. That they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Likewise, exhort the young men to be sober-minded, in all things showing yourself to be a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. Now there's a couple of things that I want to notice as we look at these verses. The first is an expression that we've probably heard, and that is that we need to learn to act our age. Now, let's just be clear. You look at verse 6, and he says, exhort the young men to be sober-minded. So this does not excuse bad behavior of young people. But what it does tell us, he says, is that older men should be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith. You know, it is always discouraging to see someone who is older, who has not learned to behave with the reverence and wisdom that should come with getting older. It's sad to see people who are older who act with immaturity and irreverence and don't set the right kind of example. Paul clearly states that based on age, we should have a certain expectation. Although not all people live up to that, there is an expectation. He does the same thing with older women. And part of the reason, he says, for the older women, and this would apply to the older men as well, is in verse 4, he sets these responsibilities of how the older women should act. Why? Verse 4, that they admonish the young women too, in order to be able to set the example. You know, older women ought to be able to say, look, I've been there, I've done that, learn from my mistakes, and or learn from my wisdom. Unfortunately, too many times, sometimes older women are still immature. They've not grown themselves to be the kind of people who can be teachers and be examples to others, particularly to younger women. He also says at the end of verse 4, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. How does it look when older men and older women behave in such a way that it brings shame and reproach upon the will of God? I've been in places where, unfortunately, it's the older ones in the congregation who are the ones who are disrespectful and irreverent and bring shame upon the word of God and make it difficult for the church to be the example of light that it ought to be. As we wrap this thought up, I want you to notice what he says to Titus in verse 7, in all things showing yourself to be a pattern of good works. And he goes on to explain what that means. And so what he's telling Titus is, you're not exempt from this. You should be behaving correctly as well. You are a preacher of the word of God, and you need to conduct yourself. It's interesting, he ends this section by saying, so that an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say. The idea is that they should not be able to find anything justifiable to hold against us in the way that we conduct ourselves. Can we say that? And can we say that we are acting our age in a way that does not bring shame and reproach upon the word of God? Let us think about this, and we hope you'll join us again tomorrow.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.